right? So it's like in 1988, you could have said the internet's not going to happen. You were just wrong, right? So it's like all this stuff is inevitable. It's going to go the way that it goes. And, you know, my job is just to make content around it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new podcast episode. Carolina Millan here, your host. And today I have somebody very special on the show, Mr. PIO VINCENZO. He is the co-founder of The Nifty, a Web3 and media company. Very excited to have you here, PIO. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. So I've been following you and your journey for the past probably year and a half now, and it's been really cool, really fun, and I've really learned so much from what you guys have been doing. But for the few people listening or watching who may not be familiar with you yet, can you share a little bit about your background, your story, and how did you end up being a content creator in the Web3 space?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming most of your audience does not, know who I am. I'm definitely not, I'm not like the president of the United States or anything. So anyway, yeah, I have a background in content, really dating back to like even high school time. But what got me into Web3 or like, crypto NFT content is I got into Bitcoin in March 2020, like a lot of people did, but that was when, for example, Michael Saylor famously got into Bitcoin, big name in the Bitcoin game these days. And that kind of got me into digital assets and digital scarcity and digital value. And by late 2020, November 2020, I heard the co-founders of Nifty Gateway, which at the time was a popular NFT platform, still exists. It's owned by Gemini, the Koch Foster twins. I heard them on a podcast, a Bitcoin podcast, talking about, quote unquote, digital art in the form of NFTs. And they were talking about digital art. And, I kind of understood it right away. It made sense to me. A friend of mine at the time was really big into trading basketball cards. He was selling basketball cards. And I was like, and they talked about NBA Top Shot, which was rising to prominence at that time too. And it just all kind of made sense to me at that point, that collectibles and artwork would be digitized, just like Bitcoin was digital money or digital value. And that was kind of what got me first thinking about it. And it took me a couple months, but by February, I bought my first NFT and it was on Nifty Gateway. And by March, I started making NFT content on YouTube, and I, had a Twitter account. Didn't know what I was doing with Twitter. I never, I was never a huge social media person. Like, as much as I focused on making content, I didn't focus on social media, which is a bad idea. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, you definitely want to make sure that you're good. Like, it's better to be good at social media, quite frankly, than anything else, because you can just like post pictures of yourself doing everyday things. And if you're good at social media, you can make money off of that. So it took me a while to learn, but I learned and ended up eventually, creating the Nifty, co-founding the Nifty with my business partners, Nifty Nick and Kix. And yeah, it's been, just media content, crypto NFT stuff since then.
Amazing. How long did it take you guys from, the moment you co-founded the company, when you saw, hey, there's an opportunity here, until you were able to really monetize it? Because I guess when you first started the show, it wasn't something like, oh, immediately it made money, right? How long did it take you guys? And what do you think are some of the key things that you did to make that happen and be able to live from this?
Yeah, we actually were able to monetize the Twitter show. In hindsight, didn't feel that way when it was happening, but in hindsight, we actually monetized it relatively early, a little bit. Like, we locked in one sponsor, and that sponsor, the CEO of that sponsor, ended up becoming one of our investors, and a friend of mine here in New York. And we also were able to get in on this program that Twitter ran that actually paid people for hosting Twitter Spaces. And so we were kind of sponsored by Twitter Spaces for a brief period too. And it wasn't bad. I don't remember how much it was. I think it might've been like $2,500 a month or a week, or I don't even remember
Not
what it
bad
was.
at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't remember because it just went to our business, and like, we weren't even paying ourselves yet. So it felt like $0, you know, but then ultimately in January, we did our first NFT drop, and we also locked in our first major sponsor, which, fun fact, was FTX. They sponsored, you know, all the significant content creators of the time. And that was like a 20K a month sponsorship. So that was like a pretty legit sponsorship.
Yeah.
And then more started rolling in. So I'd say we were individually working really hard for almost a calendar year at that point. But once we started working together, we were able to get traction pretty quickly and see results pretty quickly. It felt like forever when I was on my own, but once and I think Nick would probably tell you something similar, but once we all kind of got together, we saw, you know, we got traction right away.
Nice, nice. How was the transition from doing it on your own and then putting all the minds together and just doing one show?
Well, I was actually doing it on a team before too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but just when I partnered with the two Nicks, with Nick and Kix, it just became, it felt like an all-star team. And the first time I did a YouTube video with Nick, for example, right away I was like, out of everyone I've done podcast content with, because I didn't have a background in podcast content before, that was the part that was kind of new to me. But I'd listened to podcasts for like 6 years, and when I was a kid, I listened to like talk radio, so I was very, very familiar, and like interviews. I was very familiar with the medium, just not as a performer yet. But once I did my first podcast with Nick, I knew right away he was the strongest talent that I'd worked with at that point when it came to podcasting. So right away I was like, I need to be making podcasts with this guy all the time.
That's interesting, because I thought you had a background in either radio, like, or that you had a podcast before, because I mean, seriously, you are really good.
Thank you.
You know, and you know how to moderate, which I think is a very, very important skill in Twitter Spaces and also in the Clubhouse days. Did you spend any time on Clubhouse at all?
I didn't enjoy Clubhouse. I like got the app, made an account. I found it very hard to like listen to the content being created on Clubhouse. I didn't feel as though the participants, and you know, this is, excuse me, no offense to the participants. I mean, you're talking about basically the first people to ever utilize live social audio.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, you can't expect, that's like, you know, giving a caveman like a rock and saying, go, like, you know, make something really elaborate with this. So I just didn't really feel that the participants were properly executing, which again, they were the first people to ever do it. So it's really hard to do. And I wasn't like that interested in participating, I think, because of that, because I just didn't feel like what was coming out on the other end was that great. And when you hear like big time podcasters, when they're asked about Clubhouse, I haven't really heard too many like positive takes, because I think they had a similar reaction to me where they're like, this sounds like a dumpster fire. But once you kind of figure out how to actually make good live social audio content, that's when it becomes really cool and really interesting. You know, I don't think it's like a replacement for a traditional podcast. I just think it's a cool new thing, just like, you know, TikTok was a cool new thing for video.
So now that you've been in the space for like, well, you told me you started buying Bitcoin in 2020, right? Early 2020. So now you've been into
like March 2020.
Yeah, so almost 3 years ago now. What do you think it will take for Web3, NFTs, crypto to be taken more seriously, I guess, by, you know, the 27-year-old girl at the coffee shop that was never going to understand the word alpha? So what do you think we can do as a community as well, you know, to bring more people in and to generate more trust?
Yeah, I think for someone like that particular demographic, it would be just through a product or service that she uses. It actually doesn't even have to do with any Web3 participant. It singularly has to do with the product. And so, for example, we have a sponsor, So Rare, and they do fantasy sports with blockchain integrated. So you get a player just like someone would do in a traditional fantasy sports league, except that player is an NFT. So now you own the NFT, right? And if you get higher value NFTs, you can actually sell them for money, or you can use them in the game to get more higher value NFTs. So there's like sort of strategy and stuff in there. It's more, more or less identical to traditional fantasy sports, just with actual ownership of the assets that are being used to play the game. And so that's going to onboard a ton of people that play fantasy sports. And it doesn't have to come through like me or any other participant. It can just be someone that finds out about it that's like, oh, this is like a good fantasy sports platform. They don't even have to know that it's NFTs. They can just hear that you can sell the players or whatever, sell the cards. And then that'll just naturally onboard people. All it is like, I talked about the separation of financial instruments and entertainment products.
Yeah.
All we're talking about is like the macro trend of that separation, which is inevitable, right? And once you have entertainment products that people just want to use anyway, that have nothing to do with, finance, right? Because that same girl might not buy stocks on her own and do things like that. Like that same 20-something-year-old person just doesn't do that. And so some sort of entertainment product would be how that person gets an NFT or a blockchain asset. And it doesn't matter whether or not they understand that it is a blockchain asset or an NFT, because they have it anyway, and it's just normal.
So you think companies, because I think a few months ago, I don't remember what the news was exactly, but something about Apple integrating NFT or blockchain technology or something like that. What was that about? And do you think that's something that would help onboard people with an iPhone?
Yeah, I mean, that's just, all that stuff is just inevitable. Those businesses take their time to do it because, quite frankly, it's not that important for them to move fast. It's actually, there's layers of risk associated with major, massive corporations like that when it comes to moving fast. So they can actually take as much time as they want. They're not about to lose out to their competitors because their competitors are just as big and slow as them. Their competitors might be waiting for them to make the first move. It doesn't even matter. I saw Amazon's going to get in the mix. Everybody's going to get in the mix because it's just it's the same thing as the internet and the same thing as social media, which is why it's Web3, right? That's where that name comes from, the third iteration of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, like, all of that is inevitable. Saying that it's good or bad is irrelevant. Like, at the end of the day, it's just gonna happen. So just like the internet was gonna happen, right? So it's like in 1988, you could have said the internet's not gonna happen. You were just wrong, right? So it's like all this stuff is inevitable. It's gonna go the way that it goes. And my job is just to make content around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. What's your right now in your collection? What's your favorite NFT? And why?
I mean, so I have a mutant ape, which I know you also have, I think that's a good NFT for sure. Just because you can kind of believe in that ecosystem because of the success that they've already had and so on. So I'd say like that one because of my deep trust for the people that are running the show over there.
For me, it's also it's a tie, I guess, between my VFriend Series 1s and my Mutant Ape. I feel like those are two companies that no matter what happens, the ups and downs are still going to be here in 5 or 10 years. If you were to recommend a new person a platform, like, okay, hey Pio, I want to buy my first ETH or my first Bitcoin, with what has happened with FTX and other things like that, what's a platform where you are confident, well, to a certain extent, sending people to?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I would have said Gemini before, but now Gemini is in the thick of it with Genesis lending and all that stuff with their Earn product. It seems as though the platform itself is definitely in good shape. However, like for the exchange, however, yeah, I mean, there's like a big mess. Honestly, I think if you're in the United States, Coinbase, because it's publicly traded, it's heavily regulated. I got to think Coinbase is probably just the standout consensus number one to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. I just subscribed, and I'm not sponsored by them. If they wanted to sponsor us, I would happily oblige.
Oh yeah.
But I just signed up for their monthly program where you pay them like $20 a month and you don't have trading fees anymore. So it's like, I guess in an effort to compete with like the Robinhoods of the world. And I think to limit the volatility in their cash flow, when the crypto cycles kind of go haywire, so
Yeah.
Coinbase is interesting. And then there's other there's specific platforms for say like Bitcoin and stuff like River is a name that gets thrown out. So there's options. But like for Ethereum and stuff, like honestly, just Coinbase.
Coinbase. Yeah. I have an account, but never got to use it. For some reason, they would never accept my credit card, even though supposedly they're international. So I don't know. I'd love to use it. I did use their wallet during VCon. I remember I had my ticket on the Coinbase wallet, but yeah, it's a good platform either way. I think they're probably the most trustworthy one right now.